a Pitbull song came on, and it mentioned to live your life. Don't let it live you. Am I even living life?
Because of how they heard my voice. And I was like, what makes you think that a Black person has to speak a certain way?
No, I want to retract that. It matters, but not in the sense of being accepted. That's what we're eating for lunch is aloe vera plants. We're going to poop for days.
Why
Fantastic.
And welcome to Love Always Self. I'm Shyra.
Hi, y'all. I'm Karista, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Love Always Self.
Hi.
And welcome. Yes. Oh, how are you doing today, my love?
I am doing good. It's the weekend.
Yay.
So there's nothing better than that. Well, the weather is participating very nicely. So we like that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes. The weather's fantastic right now. It's not too hot like it was in February.
Right. And we are in Texas for those of you that are new and listening to us. So
we will get there to the heat.
We're at that null before it.
Yes, yes. It is like perfection outside. You're right. It's really beautiful. It's green, the perfection, maybe a little less with all the pollen that comes with springtime. But, you know, you got to take the good with the bad.
I know. And I just had these little baby bushes planted into the rocks. And because we've been getting rain, they're like flourishing and they're staying alive. And the first round that I did, they didn't make it.
Well, you did it in the middle of summer.
I did. I thought that the trees that were covering the shade, that were shading them for the majority of the day would like keep them alive. It did. No.
Well, part of the problem, it wasn't even just that. It was also the water restrictions.
That's true. That's true. We found ourselves like filling up pitchers of water in our kitchen and like just making runs back and forth, trying to give them water. And I'm sure it wasn't enough. Yeah.
You weren't even allowed to like use a hose, right?
Right.
It only had to be like hand watering with like a
pitcher from the kitchen sink. Yeah. So those babies didn't live and I felt really guilty and bad for it. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And then now these are like the replacement pals and they're thriving. They're my replacement pals.
Well, I hope that they get nice and established before the heat comes sweeping in.
I know. And I actually wanted to start doing gardening. And I've had, because I bought the raised garden beds like literally last winter. And I was like, this year I'm going to start gardening. They're very weathered right now and they're empty. And I have not started.
That's okay. You know what? You can start summer crops very soon.
The I will survive 115 degree weather summer crops. Yes.
Well,
is that a cactus?
Agave.
Aloe vera.
That's what we're eating for lunch is aloe vera plants. We're gonna poop for days.
Why
Fantastic.
Not? Why not? Fantastic. And how are you doing today?
I think I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. I think so.
It's just working.
You know, it's funny. I was driving here so that we could do this recording, and a Pitbull song came on, and it mentioned to live your life. Don't let it live you. And I was like, okay. Like, what does that mean? Like, and I think for me, it's just like going through the daily grind without really like being present. And so it just got me thinking about like, all right, where's my level of, awareness and presence at in this moment? And how can I just live my life a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like we ask ourselves that probably subconsciously, if not consciously, on a daily basis.
I agree. Maybe not a daily basis for me, but pretty frequently, at least several times a week. Like, okay, well, what am I doing next? What area am I going to grow in next?
Yep.
Yeah. For sure.
I feel like Sundays I take a little bit of a break from any of those thought processes. That's like my, like just get it done and then chill day.
Yeah.
But the daily grind of the Monday through Friday, I feel like I'm asking myself pretty much every day.
Am I even living life? Yeah.
like, did I eat lunch?
Which is also why we've started Divine Living. If you haven't checked that out, we do e-design. So we help you design your space to the way that you feel comfortable and want to experience that space. We also do home staging. So if you decide you don't want that space anymore, you're going to sell it and get out of Dodge, you know, let us know too. We can help you stage it if you're in the Austin area. E-design all over. Staging, Austin area.
Yay.
But you can check that out at divinelivingstyleanddecor.com.
Oh my gosh. And
wait, is it Divine Living Style Decor or Divine Living Style and Decor?
Divine Living Style Decor.
Okay, so no and.
It's kind of a mouthful.
It is.
I keep thinking of buying the domain that's just a little shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like DLSD.
Because that's what we like. We literally call it DLSD to like on everything admin. And we should probably just acronym it. It's cool. DLSD.com. Ooh, God, that just sounds a lot better.
It is.
Oh, man. Darn it. I'm on it. So, you know, I was having a moment not terribly long ago where I was feeling the perspective of somebody else when they were talking to me. And like, I actually just like was able to zoom out in mid conversation. Definitely means that I wasn't very present in that conversation, like fully. Right. And we've talked about that before. So I'll admit that, but I zoomed out and I was kind of understanding a different, I was understanding that person's experience. Right. And it had me thinking about the way I was like watching this individual, like while they were talking, and like the way I was perceiving that person versus the way they were perceiving me. And it was kind of weird. I'm not gonna lie, it was weird.
Yeah, that's really cool that you were able to do that mid sentence or mid conversation. I ask, like, what were you really like less present, or in a sense were you maybe more present?
You know, that's a solid question. Because it had me pivot the conversation. I was able to kind of like take a step back.
Yeah.
Because of it, because I could definitely tell that there was defensive-ness happening.
Yeah.
And so I was able to take a step back and just be like, huh. And I was like perceiving the way the eye movement was happening, the eyebrow inflection when they're like hitting certain words, the eyebrows got more stern, you know, like it was just interesting because I was like very hyperly aware.
I'd say you were more present.
Oh, that's cool. I'll take that. And I ended up having to pivot. I softened how I was talking to that individual.
Yeah.
Because I knew that I needed to kind of like bring it down a notch.
Yeah.
Right. And it was very interesting because the entire conversation shifted in that moment. And it was way more pleasant after that. But yeah,
that's pretty
weird.
Cool.
Yeah. It was weird.
That's neat that you could, again, like do so quickly in the moment.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we talk about how it can be difficult to do it in that moment. So it sounds like you've been practicing.
It was an accidental practice, but yes. Yes. And so I think that kind of like plays into what we're going to talk about today.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been reading a book lately, and the book is called The House on the Cerulean Sea. And I don't remember the author, but that's okay. You can look it up. The title is The House on the Cerulean Sea. It's a good book. There's not like a lot of action or anything like that, but it does have like an air of fantasy to it. But it really kind of makes you think about perceptions and biases that we have of situations and people that we may have never experienced before personally, but we already come to these conclusions that things are a certain way. So rather than give you guys like too much information in the book, because I do think it's worth reading. I think it's a good book. So go check it out. If you want to read it, go buy it and support our authors. But I did come up with an example because to help us understand maybe the lessons that I was garnering from this book. You know that saying, don't judge a book by its cover.
Speaking of books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this was about judging people or, beings without having interacted with them first. and basing all of our information on what somebody else's report or experience was. And so the example is, say somebody gets hired to be a babysitter for 2 kids, and that new hired babysitter, before they go to the job, they speak with a friend, and turns out that friend has babysat these children before. And that friend tells the new hire, oh my God, these children are absolute monsters. They are terrible. They are bad. Like, just get ready. And so now this new hire has this preconceived notion of how horrible these children will act.
Oh, wow.
And so they go in prepared for bad acting children. And I'm using quotation fingers again around like bad. Now the babysitter, the new hire, is going to go in to that experience looking for all the things that they're acting bad about or being terrible or anything that looks like the way that you do not want children to act. And then not only did this new hire babysitter get told that these children are terrible, but the children themselves have been told, you are terrible, you act bad, you are little monsters. So now these children are trying to maybe unconsciously meet these expectations of themselves to be acting bad.
Right. That makes sense.
And so when we, I guess, summing all of this up, when we receive information from outside sources about an experience or a person,
Right.
then do we really have the opportunity to truly experience them for what they are or what we've been told they are?
And even more so when you're judged like that so frequently, do you in itself start behaving based on the way you're being judged?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So this ties into the boxes that have been created for society.
Boxes.
You know, what good little girls act like, what good little boys act like, what good coworkers act like, you know, what good bosses act like, or, you know, I could list more, but I don't feel like that's necessary.
Well, they're all preconceived notions based on somebody's idea of what's considered to be the truth or the perfection of whatever scenario is being presented. Like, a good boss to one person may not be a good boss to another.
Exactly.
And the boss itself might be thinking that they do a good job based on how they were always told they were, you know, a boss should behave and do in that scenario, right?
So this isn't like a one-sided thing.
Right.
This is a multifaceted effect that occurs when we start sharing like not to say that we shouldn't share negative experiences, but when somebody tells us something of a bad experience, not becoming attached to that and making it our own experience.
Oh, yeah. I was going to give an example, and now I'm thinking, shit, if I say the example, would that then in turn become the thing that somebody becomes afraid of and like has their own preconceived notion on how it's going to be? Wow. That's a rabbit hole.
Well, like you mentioned, I think this was maybe 136. It was in our, I don't remember exactly. It was in the last couple of episodes, but you had mentioned how when you went and got a mammogram done, they told you don't share your experience.
Oh God, I did mention that. See, I'm sorry. Yeah.
but you know, I understand that a little bit more now.
Right.
Whereas I didn't understand that before when we had that conversation.
Okay.
But, you know, there is a lot of preconceived notions that it will be painful or uncomfortable. And that's not the case for everybody. Yeah, it's uncomfortable because you have to get undressed and you have to like squish your tits down. And they take pictures, which in itself, having a stranger take pictures of your breasts is uncomfortable. That whole idea.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that bad. It can just be an experience that you need to get done to better care for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard some people like in this example.
Not to say it's like delightful, just to clarify. Your socks are not going to get knocked off.
I will not share what my experience was.
I haven't had one yet, so that's fine.
But then again, like everyone is unique, and I think that that's the preconceived notion that has not been valued enough.
You're right. There's too many people that believe, maybe unconsciously, that people are so much alike.
Yeah.
And that things are similar from one person to the next.
And that you have to be similar in order to have community.
Or even be accepted.
Or be accepted, right.
And now let's tie in how this impacts authenticity.
Yes.
Because if we are told that we need to be a certain way, and now I'll use an example. We are told we need to act a certain way at a job. Mm-hmm. That sounds appropriate, given, depending on your job, right? Sometimes we need to act a little bit more professional or in a more professional capacity. And so we may not be able to show our full authentic selves.
Right.
But in our personal lives, we hope that we are surrounding ourselves with people that fully accept us and love us and our authenticity.
I'm going to touch on the job one for just a split second,
Yep.
But I do feel like this is why we're seeing more and more people becoming entrepreneurs, though.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Is a lot, in my opinion, more and more, and especially, these younger generations coming into adulthood, they don't conform to this feeling of not being authentic and not being allowed to be themselves.
Right.
In certain environments. And it's also possible that some employers out there, I'm not saying all, but some employers out there may be still prescribed to what they feel is professional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's so I worked at a company like over a decade ago, and it wasn't, like I can agree with speaking respectfully to somebody as something that is important to professionalism. Yeah. But one of the restrictions at this company was you couldn't have unnatural colored hair.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how that affects my ability to care for patients.
It doesn't. Last I checked.
And you couldn't have tattoos showing.
One of my jobs, and unfortunately I have a tattoo on my ankle. And so I was never able to wear a dress or a skirt. I always had to wear pants. Yeah.
So those types of things I don't necessarily agree with as a rational, thing that affects our professionalism.
I was like, how's my ankle tattoo from 18 years old affecting you? And it's like a tribal band.
Yeah. Why is I
aged myself.
My purple hair,
right,
affecting my ability to take your blood pressure?
I will say that's one thing I did like about my current is that our HR person, when I joined the company, had multicolored hair.
Yeah.
Seriously, green, purple, blue, yellow. It was every color was in her hair. And I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I had not seen that before until going into that environment. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
So being able to present yourself in your authentic way, it definitely breathes a level of relief.
I'll say one, a role that I find interesting, and this is kind of like a challenge question. If you're going to go and you're going to buy a house, right? And this is going to touch a little bit on unconscious biases, right?
Okay.
So let's say you're going to go buy a house, and in order to go buy a house, you need to get a realtor, and you're told by a friend, I have the best realtor ever. Seriously, every house that this person's ever sold or helped a friend out with, just nailed it perfectly, understood the client, got the cost of the house down lower, I was able to negotiate better, all the things. Okay. And then you take the card and you give the person a call, and you don't meet in person. You don't see what this person looks like. You speak to him over the phone. Beautiful conversation, very precise in language, like all the things, right? Tells you everything you wanted to hear, but doesn't sound sales pitchy in any way.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, so the first house we're going to go see is tomorrow. You go, you see the house tomorrow. They show up. The guy shows up on a Harley Davidson, chain and wallet, combat boots, leather jacket, spiked hair, like 4 inches high, with piercings and tattoos that are completely slaved. What is the first thought that comes to your head? Challenge accepted, right?
Yeah.
Because everything else was working out completely the way it was supposed to until you visually saw somebody.
Isn't that amazing?
And a majority of thought processes, probably between what I just said and now, is like, oof.
That's why I think, and I don't watch like a lot of reality TV shows, but that's why I think The Voice is so unique in how it, creates its show.
Or the, what is the one with the mask? The singing competition,
right,
where they're all in costume and you can't see them at all.
But I think that's just guessing who the celebrity is that's singing.
I know, but there's some serious talent.
Yeah.
But there's no preconceived notions of who that person is.
I was actually talking with somebody who watches The Voice. Because, again, I don't watch a lot of reality TV. But I had a conversation this week with a gentleman that was talking about this episode on The Voice. And he was like, I just think this is the coolest thing because you are taking all visual aspects out of it. Because the things like America's Got Talent, they are judging the person for being the whole package.
Yep.
How they look, how they sound, how they present themselves.
The stage effects, all of it.
So with The Voice, there was somebody that was on stage. They sung a beautiful song. Reba McEntire turned around, added that person to their team, and turns out this person is a female trans woman that's larger, tall, like 6'6", maybe like 300 pounds, bald. And none of that mattered.
Yeah.
Because the whole, I want to retract that. It matters, but not in the sense of being accepted.
Right. You were accepted for your talent.
For your talent.
Right.
Not the way he looks.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Mm-hmm. And I wish that was more often than what it is.
There's this cool art, not exhibit, but what do you call it? Like a it's like a public art piece in Chicago, downtown, right by the Bean.
The Bean.
And it's like this tall, like how am I going to describe this? It's
like a sculpture?
No, it's a moving art. So it's moving art. And basically it's this big screen. It's made up of a bunch of TVs. And I don't know if this is still there. This was like, again, pre-pandemic. So sorry if it's not there. Okay. But it's made up of screens, and you saw like the skeletons of people like coming together and like holding hands, and
I saw that. Yeah.
And you finally get a visual of the two people holding hands.
Oh, I love
And
this.
It's different types of relationships that are showing up. And what that says to me is this doesn't matter. It's the heart. Like the looks don't matter. It's what's in your heart. It's the love. It's the connection that matters.
Yeah.
It's the community.
Yeah. What's interesting is I was thinking about this story time. I was thinking about this time that I applied for a very well-known company, and not there anymore. But when I went in for the interview, it was with 3 men. The 2 of them were teammates. One of them was the manager, which I wasn't expecting a panel interview that day. I wasn't like informed that was what's going to happen. And so, me, I was like, most of my friends at that point were all men anyway, so it didn't matter. I was like, I'm a group of guys. I'm one of the guys,
Yeah.
And fully qualified for the job, probably overqualified for the job. And I could sense they had this level of like, huh, you know? But then there was like a surprise and delight. She knows what she's talking about moment.
Like the huh is the unsure, like being unsure, like not convinced that.
No, it was like their reaction to me was like surprise and delight. Like,
Oh, okay.
you know? And like, oh, she knows what she's talking about. But the initial look of me apparently was like, wait a minute. And then I found out 2 years into working there that at the time I used to do promotions and I would do like fashion shows. I would produce fashion shows, hire the models, do the runway stuff, all that, to raise money for different foundations across the city. And so I had a flyer as my social media profile, and that particular fashion show was a lingerie one, and it was for breast cancer. And so the model on the cover of the flyer was seriously pretty and claddily dressed, to say the least.
Yeah.
And so what they were expecting to come into the door that day was a tall, very thin, blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman that they have potentially seen claddily dressed on my social media profile. Now, keep in mind back then, right, it was like Facebook and like MySpace kind of stuff.
Right,
and
right.
Like Facebook was just becoming more
Like
of a
Instagram
thing.
wasn't out yet.
Right. Instagram wasn't even out yet. So, and social media wasn't that popular at that point. So they had to done some research to like even find that in the first place, at least, you know, from my perspective back then. And so I was like, is that why you guys seem like I let the wind out of your sail when I walked in at first? And they were like, well, yeah, you know, and I was like, wow. So, I mean, luckily I'm a good interviewer, but like,
And you're qualified?
and I was highly qualified, but like the fact that they were disappointed, you know, and that I had to like be more sufficient in my quality of skill because of that.
Wow.
You know? And so I thought that was very fascinating to me to find that out like so many years down into being in that role.
A little disappointing.
And disappointing
in them.
But I even got the interview because of that probably, you know?
Wow.
Like, yeah. So that was interesting. Very interesting.
Ugh.
You know, it's kind of one of those things. You gotta, you know, I honestly feel that we all have our own, you know, unconscious biases.
Sure. And judgments.
Yeah. Right? If anything, I think I'm more judgmental of myself and than ever worried about receiving judgment from others. But that's now in my life.
Right.
Right? That was not back then.
Definitely not high school, college age,
right.
20s in general.
Absolutely. Now, would I say that some of the judgments that were or perceptions from others, right, and how they thought I should have acted, did I then go and in turn act in that way? Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I did.
Yeah.
Right? I remember being told at such a young age and a majority of my young adulthood that, number one, people were always surprised by the way I talked. That like when they thought I was somebody else in race color.
Oh.
Or in skin color, right? Because of how they heard my voice. And I was like, what makes you think that a Black person has to speak a certain way?
Wow.
And it always shocked me because I was like, if you talk to anybody in my family, they sound like I do. I'm like, what makes you think that has to be a thing? And so it's always subconsciously been in the back of my mind that statement, right? And so I've always wondered, does that affect me in the way I talk sometimes?
Right.
Right. And so I do think that we act out other people's judgments sometimes.
Yes.
And I don't think it's always on purpose, you know?
No. I think some of it's just kind of like, well, if you're going to see me that way, I might as well act that way.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like you just kind of give up a little bit.
Right. What was that one that you said earlier? The flirting one.
Oh, yeah. If you say I'm a flirt, I may as well flirt.
Yeah. That was a good one.
Because just being happy and smiling sometimes is perceived as flirting, being nice to people.
Yeah.
And that's actually something that I struggled with throughout my teens and 20s is, people that I would date would get upset with me and tell me that I'm flirting. And I just smile at the waiter, that just took our order.
And so,
and so it was just kind of like, well, if I already know I'm going to get in trouble for it, I may as well do it and actually get in trouble for doing the thing.
And what's interesting about that is that it was that person's self-conscious behavior.
Not saying that was, how I acted or anything. Not saying that wasn't how I acted either. But it like when we think about kids, right? Yeah. We tell them, well, kids act this way. Well, then they're trying to fulfill that destiny that you've told them they're supposed to have.
Oh, a friend and I were having a conversation the other day, and she was talking about how, crying, kids crying, and how parents are taught to not let the kid cry, and how it's like, oh, my baby's crying in public. I'm worried about other people. So you constantly tell that kid, don't cry, don't cry, right. Don't cry. And what ends up happening is as they get older, they have been taught how to suppress their emotions.
Right.
And that crying is a sign of weakness and embarrassment.
Right. Even if that wasn't verbalized, that can be their perception.
Right. Right.
Like maybe that was on an airplane, right? And the parent was just trying to be conscious of everybody else's airplane experience. Yeah. But on the flip side of that, the child takes that as it's not okay to cry. It's not a safe thing to do.
I mean, this is why we now have noise canceling headphones, and those are very, very popular and should be used. If you don't like that, sorry.
Well, because life happens.
Yeah.
Right. And
it's a kid. It's a baby.
It's a kid. Yeah.
Like, gosh, it's like a puppy whining. You're like, what's wrong? Right. Like you want to help.
Not smack it around.
Smack it around.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
That reminded me a couple of weeks ago, my husband and I were sitting and eating dinner, and we've got 2 dogs, and they hang out around us when we're eating dinner. Well, all the time, but especially when we're eating dinner in case they get snacks. And we were watching a TV show, and I don't remember what show, but this loud like beeping noise came on the show. Yeah. And it was kind of like a smoke detector alarm, when the batteries are dying. And we're used to the dogs coming up and like sticking their nose under our arms and being like, so what you got for me there? Like, can I have a piece of chicken? And so we'll kind of like push them away and tell them to go back off or whatever. Well, that beeping noise that happened freaked them out.
Oh no.
And my husky, like, it took me 2 beeps to realize this. It took my husband longer. But he was like nose in lap, like freaking out.
Oh.
And, my husband just thought it was them trying to get snacks from us.
Yeah.
And so he got a little upset with them. And at the 3rd beep, which was the confirmation beep, because every time it beeped, the dog would freak out a little bit more. It was in perfect time with the beep. And so after my husband got upset, I was like, I think the noise is bothering them. I think we should mute this part or skip this episode. And he was like, my husband was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize. Like, I'm so sorry I got upset with you. But it's just that assumption that they are following a pattern and not, us not being aware of what's triggering them.
Yeah.
We just assume that they're being bad dogs. Finger quotes, bad dogs,
Yeah. That's
when really they're just looking for comfort.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the judgments that we place on others are because they're judgments we have on ourselves. And
because I'm bad dog too.
Maybe not the dog part. I don't know.
Rough.
I don't know. Maybe. Stay tuned.
Never mind. I'm not going to say that. Just kidding.
And I digress. I love that. Just kidding. Not today. So one of the things that Carrie and I tend to do when we are discussing what topics we're going to have is that we'll call upon our guides. And I remember telling you today that Brady is one of my guides that I have a very significant connection with. We have exchanged who's going to be a guide for who during physical experiences. And he's my guide. And he's presented himself recently, and it caught me off guard. And it came at a very significant time for me, and it was special. And so I said today, how about we take a little gander at our cards and let's see what message they have for us today. And so this is the one I got, and I found it very interesting because it was after Carrie presented today's topic. And so the card...
Because we went through a couple topics before we came back to the first one.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
that was discussed.
Right. So the card that we got is called Full Spirit Moon, and this is from the Sacred Medicine Oracle deck, which we are going to link down below for you guys.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to find it on our website, you can do that at LoveAlwaysSelf.com.
Yes. And so I'm not going to go into the whole description of the card or read 100% straight from the book for this card, but I'm going to give you a little tidbit. And so it does say what needs to be released so that you can shine as bright as the full moon. In Grandmother Moon's fullest expression, we are blessed with a light that is unapologetic and bold. Your precious essence is being called forward to match this energy. So the healing affirmation that we get from this is, it is safe to take up space. I stand audaciously and own my luminosity. I'm going to say that one more time because I really want this one to sink in.
I love this. Yes.
Me too. It is safe to take up space. I stand audaciously and own my luminosity.
I love that because it reminds us to kind of let go of these boxes a little bit and this need to be in the box.
Yep.
And really step into our authentic selves and our personal power as well. Yeah, I love that affirmation.
And it really did come at a time of need for us and in this discussion today, honestly, because I think it's very powerful. It's a powerful thing to do. Things change. Your perception changes when you start standing into your own personal power, into your true authentic self. And sometimes, I think there's I'm going to say this word again because it just keeps repeating in my head, but sometimes there's this preconceived notion that in order to be authentic, I need to know who I am fully. I don't think there will be a time where you're going to know who you are 100%. I think you're constantly growing and constantly changing. And I think it's allowing yourself to stay within the flow state of that change and just being true to who you are in the process.
Ugh, nailed it. Beautifully said.
Thanks, babe.
You're right, because we are in a constant state of evolution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As a species, as a society, and as individuals.
And that should be the fun part, the consistent discovery of self, right? That's the fun part of being a human, of being an alive being, and having these physical experiences is that you get to just rediscover who you are whenever the fuck you feel like it.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
I might dye my hair pink soon, mostly because of our Instagram covers nowadays, but
that'd be fun. Do it.
I was like, why not?
Exactly. Why not?
I can always grow it out or dye it back if I don't like it,
If your why not is because you're concerned about somebody else's opinion.
Right. Will that look good on me would be the question mark.
Yeah. Will I enjoy having this?
Right. So the question is
this what I want?
Exactly. And for myself, the question is, would that look good on me for me? Or am I thinking about that question as, will that look good for me, on me, for everyone else? And if it's the latter, that's something to be looked into.
What do you want?
Yep.
I want to read this little news story.
Yay, good news stories. We like good news stories. And we hope you guys are enjoying the good news stories. It is good news. It'd be kind of weird if you didn't. But we like to share them. So if you like listening to them or like watching us read them, then then please feel free to hit a comment down below. Okay.
Feel free to also send us some stories our way as well.
Yes.
So if you have any that have come up in your local area and want to share, you can send them over to contact@lovealwaysself.com.
Yep. And that's linked below.
Okay, so this was kind of like a pro-con story. So there's goodness in it, but there's also room for growth.
So is there a trigger to be found in this one?
No triggers. Okay. No. So I was reading about the World Happiness Report. And surprise, surprise, Finland is the world's happiest nation again.
Oh, Finland.
Funland.
Funland.
So I thought this was interesting because what it noted was, first off, like a kind of mixed picture overall. And while the positive is that what was noted since the pandemic is there's been an overall increase in kindness.
Where did they start the study? Is it during pandemic or before pandemic?
Well, let me actually open the full report here. 2021 through 2023.
I feel like that's cheating, but okay.
Well, that was during the pandemic. I mean, it covers the last 2 years. Would it really be valid if it was pre-pandemic at this point?
Did they win the happiness, study, like world study, like even during the pandemic?
Is it a competition?
Probably not. It could be, and we could totally aim for that, depending the outcome on it.
I mean, within reason.
Within reason.
But I like aiming for that, or at least aiming for better.
Right.
So again, the overall increase in kindness was experienced during the pandemic. However, surprise, surprise, there was a decline in happiness among young people. And I thought, this reminded me of our conversation, I believe back in February, and I'll link it below, but we were discussing the happiness
Like, what
study.
does happiness mean to you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, overarching, the most important factor in experiencing happiness in life was connection with others. And so obviously we all know what happened during the pandemic. Everything shut down. We stayed home. We were scared to interact with our friends and our family for fear of getting sick or getting other people sick. And a lot of that connection was muffled.
Yeah. And a lot of people were stuck in some pretty not so great situations.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Some very terrible situations. So I think that it's important to remember, and because it's our younger generation, encouraging and being a role model in connecting with them. We have those big brother, big sister programs, but they're just about, it's almost like you skip the age of 18 to 28 a little bit. And there's still that need to connect with mentors at that age and people that they can trust to talk to about issues.
I just got this really weird visual, like brain visual or head visual.
Brain visual.
What is it called?
In your thought cage?
My thought box. In my thought box.
Mm-hmm.
And it was of something, I don't remember what it's called, but when you look under a telescope and you see something crawling.
In a telescope or a microscope?
I'm sorry, in a microscope.
Okay.
Shit. When you look into a microscope and you see something crawling on a cell, but it's a natural part of the process or something like that, and then it attaches and then grows. I don't know. We can cut this part out. But hear me out for a second. Okay. We can cut this part out, but hear me out.
I'm just waiting for the rest.
Yeah. So
this is your visual.
This is my visual.
All right. Looking in a microscope, something crawling attaches to a cell.
It's a little weird thing that's kind of moving around. Looks like an alien, but anyway, I don't know what it's called. I'm not scientific like that. So When it's removed, then it kind of withers and dies, right? When it's disconnected from the source that
Are you talking
feeds
about a
it.
parasite?
I don't know if that's a good thing, right? But like, oh God, that's a bad comparison. So what I was thinking of, what I was thinking of is like, we were very much removed from from Mother Earth herself when we were forced to stay inside, right? And that in itself is like picking a flower out and never putting it back in water or back into the earth or something like that. Like it's going to like wither away. And so,
That's a really good example.
yeah. So I just couldn't come to the terms of what the heck that thing's called, but yeah.
Sounded like a parasite.
Is it a parasite? Oh man.
Well, if it attaches and then it can be removed and it withers and dies from its host cell and it's feeding off of it,
yeah, it's probably a parasite. Okay.
Sounds.
We'll go with
There
that.
could be other things.
You know, this is not my forte. I'm just gonna skip right over all that.
So, something that was interesting in this report, and again, this isn't like everything's happy, everything's positive, right? Because we don't subscribe to toxic positivity, but the positive in this is becoming aware of where we're at so that we can move forward and improve on things, optimize our situation. So here in the US, it actually said that well-being is declining for people under the age of 30. And it's been going on for a little while.
Well, they're like really far away from retirement age, so
depressed that they have to work so long. Present their inauthentic selves. There's no way they're going to be able to buy a house
ever
on minimum wage.
Wow. Yeah, makes sense.
Sorry, this good news story is wah wah. But again, what was really encouraging about this report was the acts of kindness through, all over the world, through all generations, was this people reaching out and trying to help each other.
I think that's beautiful.
And so where can we do better? How can we help our younger generation feel safe, feel loved, feel connected and cared for? And so while this, again, isn't like super positive, happy, people get married and live happily ever after kind of thing. I think this is great that there's more kindness and we are becoming aware so that we can work on this.
That's beautiful. Connection.
Connection's
all that matters.
Connect the dots. Connect four. Twister. I don't know. I'm just saying things now.
Speaking of connection, hit that subscribe notification bell. It helps us grow. It helps us connect with others. Mm-hmm. Speaking of social and connections, we do have TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts. So feel free to head on over to, it's always at LoveAlwaysSelf.
Check it out.
Yeah.
As mentioned earlier, we also have a website. LoveAlwaysSelf.com, where you can find this deck by Asha Frost, this Sacred Medicine Oracle deck that you shared the new moon, spirit moon.
This
card.
one was called the Full Spirit Moon.
Yep.
Sorry,
had a little like zone out moment there.
This one was called the Full. I can't
you
say
said
this
it was
card.
a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a
Full
mouthful.
Spirit Moon. Anyways, you can find those decks there along with all of the other decks that we use on our episodes.
And she likes my Vanna Wamp moment, so I'm going to go ahead and
Ta-da.
da-da-da. Oh my gosh. You know what? I really do appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you, and I hope you all are having the best rest of your day. And don't forget
to go check out some previous episodes if you haven't checked out the interview with JJ.
We're having fun over here. Just join along. It's totally fine.
If you, I'm serious, guys. If you haven't checked out the interview with JJ, go do that. It was
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic.
He was awesome. Yeah. And the breathwork session totally blew my mind.
Yeah, it did.
And oh my gosh, that episode, hilarious. If you don't laugh at that, I don't know what to tell you, man.
Wait, I think the episode before this one is the one with Veronica.
Yeah. And then so also, if you haven't checked out our episode with Veronica with Bella V, go check that out. Her candles are absolutely amazing. Her self-care items, like just incredible. So treat yourself.
And she's a wonderful light too. So,
And on that note, don't forget to love first,
love last,
and love always.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, listener, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us in this moment. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to our next connection.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow to stay notified of new content from Love Always Self. If you have any questions or topics you'd like for us to discuss, please hit us up on any of our social media platforms linked in the show notes below.
I'm Karista.
And I'm Shyra.
And until next time, remember to love first,
Love last,
and love always. Love Always Self podcast is meant for entertainment purposes only. We do not make any warranties about the completeness, reliability, and accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. Any action you choose to take upon the information in this podcast is strictly done so at your own risk, and we will not be held liable for any losses and damages in connection with the use of our podcast. Any and all medical concerns should be addressed with a licensed healthcare provider, as well as any questions that may be derived from the information discussed in this podcast.